Hey guys, Sean here, and welcome to the F1 Word. Now, usually when we hit the summer break, I take the opportunity to do my driver lineup predictions for the following season. They're usually way off, but they are a bit of fun. However, I started looking at doing that last week and hit a bit of a roadblock, specifically when I realised that actually I don't think much, if anything, is going to change for 2024. Potentially a controversial statement, but hear me out on this one. So rather than doing the proper predictions right now, I'm going to make this video instead to explain why I think this could be the least silly season we've seen in a long time. Editing Sean here. I don't know what that guy is on about because these absolutely end up being predictions, but with a bit of an explanation as to why I think things will stay as they are, and the title of the video will reflect that. I just wanted to let you know, but back to the video. Before I get there though, I do just want to address the inevitable "why do people call it silly season" comment, because it does crop up from time to time. Well, I'm afraid it's not actually all that exciting a reason. It really does do exactly what it says on the tin. The media, especially during the summer break when there's nothing else to talk about, goes into a frenzy as the paddock rumours start to swirl. We get stories like Hamilton to Ferrari or Norris to Ferrari or anybody with a surname to Ferrari plastered all over the place. And for the most part, they end up being complete and total nonsense. Sometimes they do come true though. Look at the time race fans broke the news, or rumour as it was at the time of Ricciardo's move to Renault. So yeah, occasionally they are accurate, but quite often they are just, well, silly. Also, we might get some silly shenanigans with drivers suddenly announcing they're leaving a team, that team announcing a replacement driver, and then that replacement driver taking to social media to say they're not racing for them after all. What a story that was. So there we have it, silly season. Ultimately though, it's just a fun term for the driver market. Getting to the point though, why do I think we might not get many, if any, changes for 2024 when it comes to the driver lineups? Well, the too long didn't read version of all of this is that I just don't think anybody's going to move teams based on what's happening right now. Obvious statement alert. If you are watching this video in 6 months and Verstappen has moved to Haas, Hamilton has opened a new bar in Grimsby, and Albon now runs his own cat sanctuary, then yes, that statement will be wildly out of date and this video will have aged poorly like most of my content does. But I can only come to a conclusion based on the information we have right now. Red Bull will, in my opinion at least, not be making any changes. Max Verstappen is winning everything. And although he did hit a bit of a dip in form, Sergio Perez is, at least according to the Red Bull bosses, doing everything he needs to do right now to keep his seat. Second place in the standings appearing to be the minimum requirement. Not to mention the fact a big fuss has been made about Daniel Ricciardo staking a claim for a 2025 seat with the team, and you can see why. Unless he has a disastrous end to the season, I think Checo will stay where he is. George Russell is contracted to Mercedes, so he's going nowhere, and although it isn't officially official yet, I am certain Lewis Hamilton will stay with the team for at least 2 more years. In fact, the latest rumours as I sit here and record this says that the deal will be announced before Zandvoort. Aston Martin have Fernando Alonso tied down for another year, and Lance Stroll is probably there until he checks into a retirement home, so that covers the top 3 teams right now. Ferrari is also closed off as both Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz have deals in place. And with the seats up the grid filled, Leclerc is unlikely to move on. In fact, he's recently said that his dream is to become a world champion with Ferrari. And if there's a slight opportunity for that to happen, he will have no doubt about pushing to stay with the team. And Sainz has previously said himself that he will take some time over the winter to decide on his future from 2025 onwards, amid very strong speculation that he's on the list of drivers Audi are looking at. McLaren, easy enough, have Lando Norris under contract, and Oscar Piastri signed a multi-year deal with the team last year. That and the fact both drivers have had a very strong season, certainly since the updates have arrived, and there is no reason to make any change. I think that's a very good lineup. Alpine have Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly under contract for next season, and quite frankly, the driver lineup is the last thing that team needs to be worrying about right now. There has already been a raft of changes and exits from senior positions, so sticking with the same drivers, making at least one part of the team stable is a no-brainer, and that's regardless of the contract situation for the drivers. Haas made the call last year to go with experience for 2023, and although it has been a bumpy road in terms of results, not helped by a car that prefers to go backwards on a Sunday rather than forwards, both Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg have done an okay job, especially on a Saturday. Gunther Steiner has previously said they are happy with the lineup, and all the noises seem to say the team will stick with the same drivers for next year, so that's another 2 seats locked down. And for the record, I'm not actually sure on Hülkenberg's contract. I've read 3 articles on it, and 2 say his deal is up at the end of this year, and 1 says it's the end of next year. Either way, though, I expect him to stay. This is where it could get a little bit more interesting, though, I suppose, but that's only because there's not much interest elsewhere. Alex Albon is under contract with Williams and is having a really strong season, so that's one seat sorted. Logan Sargent's deal, though, is set to expire at the end of this season. However, James Vowles has said quite recently the team is happy with the direction Sargent is heading in terms of his performances, and they believe his first points are just around the corner. He's also a very good asset to have on board from a marketing point of view because he is the only American driver on the grid and we've got 3 races in the USA. So given that it is his first season and he needs a little bit of time to settle in, one season is not enough for a complete and total rookie, and the fact they've got a great marketable asset, I think they will give him one more season. See how he improves next year and go from there. But more on that a little bit later in the video. Valtteri Bottas is tied down to a deal with Alfa Romeo for next season when the team goes back to, we assume, just being called Sauber before its big Audi deal fully kicks in. On the other side of the garage, though, Zhou Guanyu's contract does end at the end of this season. Now, there are some, specifically on social media, who believe he will get the chop because they feel he hasn't been good enough. I totally disagree. Last season was a decent first outing for Zhou, and he's built on that nicely in a worse car this season. He's closer to Bottas in terms of the teammate averages, and he's only a point adrift of the far more experienced Finn. Sure, alright, neither driver is setting the world alight this season, but Zhou has done enough for me at least to earn at least one more year in that car. Don't forget the other factors at play here, though. Next year is finally supposed to see the return of the Chinese Grand Prix, so there is value to keeping Zhou on board for that. But also, the bigger picture for the team is what they do when it comes to drivers for the big Audi switch. There are a lot of very good drivers up for grabs next season and at the end of 2025, so sticking with what they have now during this transitional phase whilst keeping an eye on who becomes available on the market from next year onwards makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. As for the other AlphaTauri, Yuki Tsunoda's deal expires at the end of the season and Daniel Ricciardo is only on loan from Red Bull for the rest of this year, so officially they have no drivers signed up for next season. On the Aussie though, and as already touched on, his personal goal as confirmed by himself and Christian Horner is to perform well enough to take Checo's seat in 2025, and if that remains the case in the next few weeks, I mean, why wouldn't it? Then surely the plan is to keep him at AlphaTauri or whatever they're going to be called next year. I cannot see a situation where they give him the rest of this season to perform and then he goes back to sitting on the sidelines before switching for 2025. That makes no sense at all. The only way I can see him going back to his reserve role or whatever role he had at Red Bull is if his next 10 races are absolutely atrocious. And if that's the case, I cannot see how he ends up in that car in 2025, unless, of course, he puts in some amazing testing performances. But is that worth the gamble? And to reiterate the point I made towards the start of this video, no, I do not think Perez will lose his seat at the end of this season, certainly not to Ricciardo. Mid next season if he doesn't perform, possibly, or the end of next year, more likely, but this year, no, not for me. Plus, and to be quite frank about this, because I can't get my head around what people are thinking, why would you pick Ricciardo over Perez based on half a season and thus ignore Checo's strong performances for Red Bull over the last couple of seasons, as well as Ricciardo's poor couple of years at McLaren? In my mind, it just makes a lot more sense to give them both the rest of this season and next season to show what they've got and then make a call from there. Then again, F1 doesn't always make a lot of sense, does it? So we'll see what happens. The final point I want to make on Ricciardo, if, as the rumours suggest, Hugo Boss is trying to do a naming rights deal with the team for next year, then Danny Ric and, to be fair, Yuki Tsunoda would be great to have on board for that relaunch. They are popular and so are very marketable personalities. As for Tsunoda, I think this is quite obvious, really. Helmut Marko has been glowing in his assessment of his performances, and although he has only scored 3 points, he's been around the fringes of the top 10 quite consistently this year, and I'd argue this has been his best year yet in terms of his on-track performances, especially when you consider the car he's driving. He really seems to have matured as a driver through last season and this season so far. There are also a lot of changes coming to the team next year, and so a bit of stability wouldn't hurt at all. But even without that, Yuki has definitely earned another year at that team, in my opinion at least. So I expect AlphaTauri to stick for 2024. It is also worth noting that there is a lack of real alternatives out there. The experience of Ricciardo and Hülkenberg have been snapped up already. And although drivers like Frédéric Vesti and Théo Pourchaire, for example, are both having good seasons in F2, neither of them are really dominating like we've seen the likes of Leclerc and Piastri do in the past. I suppose what I mean by that is that whilst they're doing well, neither are really making people say, wow, at the moment. I think both look good for a seat in F1 in the future, just not for 2024. Liam Lawson is doing a great job in Super Formula. By the way, if you've never watched Super Formula, definitely give it a watch. Very entertaining. And I would love to see Lawson get a seat at AlphaTauri or living in Dreamland, even Red Bull. That's just not going to happen, is it? But I don't see either team dropping their current drivers to make room for him. Maybe another shout for 25, we shall see. Now, Alex Palou's latest contract drama is an intriguing one. I would quite like to see him get a shot in F1, and he has been linked to AlphaTauri and more strongly to Williams in recent weeks. But as I sit here and record this, all the noises seem to suggest that he will be staying with Ganassi for 24. But I must admit, although F1 isn't the be-all and end-all, I totally understand that. Alex Palou seems to really want a seat in F1, so I wouldn't be totally surprised if he's negotiating with somebody. But again, that may not be for next year, it may be for the following year. It's a really interesting story. Go and have a read up on it if you want to and watch this space. But I think he'll stay with Ganassi for next year. Another name that has been mentioned in relation to replacing Logan Sargent is Mick Schumacher. He held talks with the team before they made the call to go with Sargent, if you remember. And if you throw into the mix the team's Mercedes links and James Vowles' strong relationship with Toto Wolff, it is hard to argue that Schumacher to Williams is impossible. However, as I've already said, based on the here and now and listening to what Vowles has been saying, I can see them giving Sargent one more year. The only way that changes is if the American driver has a shockingly bad end to the season and doesn't show any kind of improvement, in which case, maybe Palou and Schumacher will go head-to-head for that seat for next season. I do realise, by the way, that I have just basically done my predictions for next year despite my struggles with it. But in conclusion, whilst next year's silly season could be a lot of fun with drivers like Leclerc, Sainz, Perez, Alonso and more becoming available, I think this year's, as I've said a few times now, is going to stay pretty much as it is. And you know, as I said when I was talking about Alfa Romeo, perhaps it's that 2024 driver market teams are waiting for. Why commit to a lineup now when there are some big names available for the 2025 season? We might get a change for next year at a team like Williams, for example. They possibly feel the most likely to make a switch. But I'm not expecting any big shocking moves. And now I've said that, Lewis Hamilton will probably announce his retirement or something and blow the market wide open. But let me know down in the comments section if you agree that we could be set for a quiet, silly season this year. Or are you still expecting something big to happen and all hell to break loose? Let me know. That is it for this one then, but I will be back soon with some more content as always. And yes, F1 is back next week. Yes. But in the meantime, if you did enjoy this one, then please do leave a like as it really does help the channel out. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos or streams. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.